Hello, everyone. Today I wanted to talk about the red flags when interviewing for a job in corporate America. I know firsthand how hard job hunting can be, and sometimes we take jobs that we don't really want just because we need a paycheck, we need to feed our children, and we need to pay for our house. But these are some red flags that I want everybody to be aware of and be cautious of when interviewing. My disclaimer today is while I talk here about my experiences, my life, and my job at corporate America and red flags that I noticed, that doesn't mean every job in corporate America is like mine or every manager in corporate America was like mine. I don't want to paint every single company or manager with a wide brush, you see. But these are some red flags that go hand in hand with toxic work environments and bad business, especially with the managers in corporate America. If you are interviewing or if you have even just started working in corporate America, these are some of the red flags. This would be more prevalent in a family-owned company, but I suppose it could happen in any company. But there is a shift in management at the top. Somebody passes away, somebody has a stroke, somebody, has a car accident, and they can't effectively manage the company anymore going forward. Somebody else at the top joins in as the head person. If you are interviewing for a job and you find out that the company just had a shift in ownership, at the very minimum, do your research and find out who used to be in charge of the company and who's running it now. The second red flag I need to read from my notes because there's a lot here. While once a friendly family company, meaning the owners were a family that started it all, it has shifted a 45 and a 55% split, an uneven split with an outside person or brokerage firm. This means the family that started this company is no longer making executive decisions without the input of the other party or the brokerage company. And the operations are checked by this third party or brokerage company. And what does that mean? It means the values of the company are degraded. It means the decisions that the family members used to make together are now being made separately and comprised of opinions of outside people and brokerage companies that do not have the same desire to follow the values. And if it is a brokerage company, ultimately the goal of that brokerage company, especially if they have a higher stake interest in the company will be sold. Brokerage companies often hold on to a company for maybe 5, maybe 10 years, and they sell them off. So if you're in an interview and a manager tells you that it used to be a family company, but they've had this tragedy in the family, so an outside firm or somebody else is managing the company now, it may not even be worth your time pursuing because the brokerage company will ultimately sell out. Point number 3, red flag number 3. Instead of a thank you bonus at the end of the year, the outside owner or brokerage firm agrees to a thank you card with a small gift card in it, less than $100 a piece for each employee, or a company catalog from which all employees may pick a logoed hoodie sweatshirt bearing the company name. While that still shows a small token of appreciation, and while none of us are entitled to have a bigger bonus or anything at all, okay, but if you're used to a company that gives out large cash bonuses at the end of the year or bonuses based on your job, some managers get bigger bonuses than regular employees and so forth. But if all of a sudden, because the company has split and the new owner is passing out $25 gift cards to Walmart, or you can pick a t-shirt or sweatshirt with the company's logo on it, to me, that's a red flag. Everywhere legitimate I've worked, I've always gotten large bonuses. They were based on my work. Red flag number 4. This is a lot of information here. The managers whom have worked with the company for at least 25 years with people skills, business degrees, or extensive training right out of high school are now replaced with inexperienced managers. Now, I have a whole page of notes on this red flag number 4, so I want to just stop right there, and I want to go back to what I said about extensive training right out of high school. And what do I mean by that? Well, years ago, people could get high-level managerial jobs with no business degree at all, or any kind of degree, or any kind of college for that matter. The world has changed. Now, a lot of times, it's required to have some sort of business background or degree or education in the field that you want to go into. And therefore, the younger managers usually have degrees of some sort, but not always. But the people that have been there for 25 or more years, that maybe were hired right out of high school, that have done a fantastic job, that had the extensive knowledge and background because they were trained expertly at their job, they are being replaced. They are being replaced with inexperienced managers that have absolutely no knowledge of anything about the company. They have no people skills, and think people skills means going out every Friday night and mingling at happy hour. Or they openly admit they've never had a job like this before, and while the manager's job is focused around budgets and meetings and managing an entire branch of people and customers or clients, their prior job was, say, a tow truck driver. Now, when I say all that, I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone. That is not my goal here. What I'm trying to say is, in my experience, where I've worked, the managers that they hire to replace the older managers, the younger manager that comes in, they may not even be that much younger. Okay, I'm talking about, say, a 40-year-old that comes in and gets a manager position. In one of my prior videos, I mentioned that this actually happened. I had a great manager I worked with, and he was all of a sudden just replaced with this guy who was about my age. He wasn't, a 25-year-old. He wasn't right out of high school. He had no education. He had no background in our company. And his goal and focus every day was talking about Friday night drinks at the local pub. And that was more important to him than the work we did collectively as a team in my department. When you are interviewing, if this comes up, and somebody says, oh, I've been a manager here for a month, or you find out that the manager that had been there for 25 years was replaced by this person, and you find out that this manager just on a whim got this job, and the manager says something like, what do you think of happy hour? Or, something along those lines. These are all red flags. It's great to have a social network within your teams, and it's great to have social time with your coworkers, but that is not normal. It is not normal for managers to sit around and schedule happy hour, but not talk about the important issues of your day-to-day job when a question comes up. Instead, they're so focused on what they're going to be doing on Friday night, or the golf game that they want to go play on Saturday. The next really important red flag. The company starts micromanaging their employees through deteriorating relationships with managers, which erodes workplace morale. Now let's go back to that prior red flag about the manager who likes to party, and that's all he looks forward to at the end of the week, instead of looking forward to your work and your work ethic and what you bring to the company. He's talking about his golf game. When I first started with the company in corporate America, the manager there had been there for almost 30 years, or he was not a micromanager. He recognized and understood the talent of his employees, and therefore he did not need to micromanage anybody. The new manager that was put in charge of my department, he was a micromanager, as was his boss, as was the boss ahead of him. And there were way too many managers in this company to begin with. So I could go on and on all day about how many managers there were. But micromanaging ultimately deteriorates the relationships between coworkers, and it deteriorates the relationship between manager and employee. Pretty soon, instead of emails showing up in your inbox about the great job you do for the company's bottom line, the tone shifts to a negative connotation that no one is working hard enough to meet the company's goals. And this is why. Because that remaining family member in the company, it's either a stranger or a brokerage firm, because that remaining family member who owns the company has decided to expand into other territories. And he can't without you working more and trying harder. So let's break that down. If you were at an interview, or if you just started a job and somebody is giving you the micromanaging vibes, that is not a sign of a stable company. That is a sign of a desperate company. That is a sign that they don't trust their employees. And if they can't trust their employees to do the job they hire them for, that's a red flag. Here I have another page full for red flag number 6. The reviews you once had, where they discussed what a great asset you are and what a great employee you are, have now shifted. The demeanor and tone are criticizing the fact that you didn't double or triple your work output. And they might even compare you to a different employee. Or, my favorite, they'll say, so-and-so has been here half the time you've worked here, and they're already doing more work or doing better work or bringing in more money for the company or something along those lines. They compare you to an entire department of people. So say a department has 10 people in it. You're solo. You have a little office and you're solo working your job. You and the other department do similar jobs, but not the same. They will question why they ever hired you, seeing how that department together as a whole does this and that. But you alone only do this. If you speak up about it, the only option for you is out the door. In other words, be very careful if you are interviewing or if you have just started at a company and all of a sudden they're comparing you to an entire department of people. They're saying 5 people in that department do way more than you. Well, isn't that kind of common sense? Yeah, 5 people could get more work done than 1 person, you see. But that's twisted, and that's exactly what they do. They start comparing you, not only to other employees, but other departments, and then treat you like if you don't step up the plate and do more work and work harder and work more hours, you will be shown the door. That brings me to red flag number 7. Soon, you are embattled with other personnel whom the managers have turned against you. This is a big one now. They've turned people against you. This can happen right in the interview. Believe it or not. They go behind the scenes. If you're sitting there in a conference room or if you're sitting there out in the open, they go behind the scenes and they will talk to people. Hey, what do you think about this candidate? You may even have a potential coworker sitting in on the interview with you. But they won't make the hiring decision based solely on their opinion. They're going to be asking other people. And it's not usually the people that are kosher or who have worked with the company and are good workers. It's usually the ones that don't have the experience. They don't have your skill set and knowledge. And they're either jealous or for whatever reason, they just don't like you. So instead of the once family-friendly company that you signed up to work for, if you did take the job, you have now been downgraded to words. You will be called crazy. You will be called not all there. And you will also be told you're a waste of space or picked on relentlessly by other coworkers, other managers. That's how you will be seen within the company. So if you were sitting in an interview and you get the vibe that you're really being judged, or if you see people walking by and the manager keeps leaving the room, that's a red flag. And if you do take the job and quickly become embattled with other personnel, and suddenly people are referring to you as crazy or not worth the space you take up in your cubicle or office, those are truly red flags. There's another big red flag, number 8. Instead of receiving praise for showing up every day, you are now expected to be there earlier and stay later than anyone else. While others scroll their cell phones all day, you work nonstop, producing tangible results. But nonetheless, you are used as an example by higher ups when you choose not to go to the company apple picking fest, whatever outing they choose. Because your 10-year-old had a sports day and you had to be there to cheer them on. It's a Saturday or a Sunday and your company decides to take everybody to this apple picking fest or a pumpkin carving fest or something like that. And you can't go because you want to spend time with your child or whatever the case may be. You see, you can't go for whatever reason. You don't normally work Saturdays and Sundays, but now the company isn't just requesting your presence or inviting you there. They're demanding it of you. So if you're in a job interview and they put out vague descriptions of overtime and what they expect of you, or if they come out with statements like, yeah, we have company get-togethers a couple times a year, or we have, meetings, you can ask, are these mandatory? And if they say yes, that's a huge red flag. I've seen a lot of companies that have different festivals, or I went to one time where it was a really great picnic. They had seafood and they had water balloons and they had all kinds of fun stuff. I really enjoyed myself, but it wasn't mandatory. And that's the difference. And that was a huge company. And I went as a guest. And that right there is telling. But if somebody says to you, well, we have outings several times a year, but they're mandatory and we go apple picking or we do this or we do that, that's a red flag. You don't want to get involved in a company like that. And the reason for it is because they don't have work-life balance. All they're interested in is your time and what you can do for that company. They don't care about you. They don't care about your life. They don't care about your days off. They have no boundaries and no respect. Also, if you're interviewing and they say something like, your hours are 9 to 5, but we appreciate it when people come in at 8 and stay until 6, that's a huge red flag because they're lying. They don't appreciate you coming in at 8 and staying until 6. They're going to expect you come in at 8 and stay until 6. And then they're going to start expecting that you come in at 7 and stay until 7. I've worked in jobs like that before. So you just want to be careful that you ask the questions up front and read between the lines. Read the room, read the manager, and understand that they're lying to you from moment one when you sit down in that interview chair. Okay, red flag number 9. This is a long one. You soon find yourself chastised because you are no longer a team player. The company wants all employees to become one. They want you all to think alike, act alike, and do as they say. Your once loved job of doing your best is now the reason they hold over your head for not giving you that well-deserved raise or promotion. In other words, if you're sitting in an interview and they talk about, or our employees are team players, something like that, in of itself, it's not a red flag, you see. But along with the other red flags I have mentioned, such as mandatory, company outings and so forth, If you hear anything like that, they're not looking for a team player. They're looking for you to be one with the company, meaning they do not respect your boundaries, and there, again, is no life-work balance. And they don't care if you have something to do on Saturday. You may find yourself having to go into the office because they expect it of you. And when you aren't a team player, when you can't make the company apple picking fest on Saturday, now they hold that over your head for not giving you a raise or a promotion. Here's red flag number 10. This is also a long one. Soon they seek employees whom have been fired from top competitors in their industry. Some even embattled in phony lawsuits with their former employers, who are your company's competitors, are now seated at the right hand of the owner. And let me go back to that red flag where I said one of the owners is no longer in the company, so the new owner has a smaller share in the company, such as 45% versus the brokerage firm with 55%. Okay, so now this person who was fired from the prior company, not because the company was mean, but because this person was not doing their job. Okay, they get fired for not doing their job. They go to this new company and they are seated in a chair right next to the owner. They bypass all of the other managers. They bypass all the departments, and somehow they make it above the CEO. They are in charge. They make the decisions. They tell you what to do. And if you question anything, your computer stops working instantly and you are escorted out the door. They give you no warning. They give you no notice. You are made an example of. They share this information that it's not okay to question or ever question tactics of managers within the company. That is a huge red flag. If you are in an interview and somebody tells you that the higher up came from a competitor and they were fired, so you swept them off their feet. If you are in a job interview and somebody tells you the person in charge with the owner is somebody they recruited that had been fired from a competitor, that's a huge red flag. Why on earth would this company hire somebody not only who had been fired? That's really not the issue, because, good people get fired too. Let's just put that out there, okay? There are cases where really good employees get fired. So now that I've gone over the red flags of whether you're interviewing or just starting out in a job, here are some things to be on the lookout for so you can make the decision of whether or not to stay with a company like this. So now, bearing in mind all that I have just said, especially about the person in charge now that was fired from a competitor, expect mandatory meetings frequently. That could look like weekly, that could look like daily, that could look like monthly. And in addition, you may have to attend multiple mandatory weekend meetings, and you may even have to travel. You might notice more and more micromanaging managers or micromanaging in general. People who used to be your coworker are given different roles, and now all of a sudden they're micromanaging you. And then if they do require you to be at a meeting, say states away, and you say, well, that meeting is 3 days. I can't go. I have small children. They will literally tell you to your face, that's an excuse, not a reason. Get a sitter. And if you do not comply, if you do not hop a plane, hop a bus, hop a train, or drive states away for a mandatory 3-day meeting, they will fire you. Suppose you have young children. You need to get them to school. You need to get them on the bus. You need to help them get ready. You need to feed them breakfast. You go into work 9 to 5. You sometimes stay late, but your hours are 9 to 5, which were understood in your interview. All of a sudden, they come to you and they say, we're going to have a meeting at 7 a.m. and it's mandatory and you need to be at the meeting. You need to come in early. And you say, well, wait, I can't be there at 7 a.m. I have small children. Again, they tell you that that's an excuse and you better be there or else. And then they make a formal announcement through this rejected, fired employee who has no business managing anybody. And she comes in with an email and tells all of you, you will be there at 7 a.m. It doesn't matter if you have small children. This is a work meeting and it's required attendance and you need to be on time. So now, having said that list, what if you can't comply with these new rules? What if these weren't disclosed to you in an interview? Or you've been at the company for a while. These are all new policies and procedures they just came up with the hiring of this person. And you're like, what? Well, now you will be the target and the sole subject of HR. If they can't beat you down with these rules that you cannot comply with because you have young children, you have a family, they will see to it that your goals will be unattainable. No matter how hard you work, no matter how many hours you work, no matter how much your work pays off for the company. Now it's a big one. No matter how much your work pays off for the company, which is the whole goal here, right? You spoke up. You questioned. And no matter what you do, how you do it, you will never succeed at this company because they will make the bar set so high that you cannot ever reach it. Okay, now I want to go over what to look for when interviewing. Just look for these red flags so you at least you know what you're getting into. If you hear terminology such as they offer generous salaries, the terminology they should be using is competitive. They should be using competitive salaries. They brag about the employees that were hired from other competitors because they were fired from their competitors. They brag about it like it's some kind of trophy employee to have a fired employee heading up your whole company. Their motto or company mission includes wording such as great people. Okay. We have such great people working here. That is psychobabble. That is psychobabble to gaslight you into thinking they appreciate their employees. If you see that on their company logo, you see it on magnets on the side of company vehicles, you see it on signs, it's not the company for you, believe me. When anybody says, we have great people that work here, they do not mean it. They're not sincere. It's psychobabble. The managers are less qualified and have no experience in the job they are hiring or interviewing you for. If you go in there and you have a resume that is untouchable, you are the best candidate for the job, you have years experience, or you have the education to back it up, and you go in there and the manager has no experience, no life skills in this industry, never stepped foot in a class about it, never had a seminar about it, and they're interviewing you, that's a really big red flag. Because how on earth would they know who the appropriate candidate is to hire for the job? The person interviewing you talks more about him or herself and their achievements. And that alone isn't the red flag, but this part is. They talk about all 25 prior jobs they've had and how they're so proud of that. If somebody has moved from company to company to company, that's a huge red flag. Now, I'm not talking about somebody in the military that moves a lot. Yeah, somebody in the military might have 20 jobs because they've moved state to state to state, wherever they were taken, in the military. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a person who is interviewing you, such as a manager, and they're gloating and they're talking about all these prior jobs they've had. And you're sitting there like, okay, I'm way overqualified for this person and I've only ever had 2 in my whole life. See what I'm saying? No, that's not good. That's going to be a terrible manager. The company has been in business for 75 years, yet no one, not even the CEO, has worked there for more than 10 years. The company where I worked, they came in one year and swept all of the old timers right out the door. Every single last one of them went bye-bye. As sad as that was, the owner himself has not worked in the company for more than 10 years because he's the youngest of the family chain that worked in the business. So just think about that for a moment. The company that you're sitting down to interview with, nobody's been there for more than 10 years. So the chances that you're able to grow in this company are slim to none. You may use this as a starter job, but don't bet on the fact that it will provide a long-lasting career. They offer a commission program, but set the bar so high it's unattainable. So say if you have a quota to meet, it could be a sales position or not. Whatever position you have that has a commission or bonus program. But they set the bar so high, you'll never make it. So what you will end up with is that generic, generous salary they say they offer. Say they come at you and say, we're going to offer you a generous salary of $32,000 a year. But, sky's the limit. There's unlimited commission. We don't cap commission here. Often it's unattainable and you'll never make it. So just keep that in mind. When you take that job, know up front you're taking that job for $32,000 a year and nothing else. I already discussed how places like this require you to come in longer hours, stay later, or mandatory meetings states away. The difference is a real company, a real job would only require that in the event it's required for job training or to perform your job duties. In other words, if you go into an interview and the company says there's mandatory travel required, you know up front that that's part of the job. You're taking that job with that understanding. But if you're already hired and they come to you after the fact and tell you that you are required to travel to this apple picking festival and it's 4 states away and they don't care if you have childcare or not, it's mandatory, that's a little ludicrous. Okay? And that same thing happened to me. In the last year I worked for this company, I went to one of those meetings and I said to myself, I am way more valuable and important than this stupid meeting. They brought in a guest speaker who was I guess you would say an influencer. She's on Instagram. She has no industry knowledge. She has never worked a day in the field I was in. She never did any of the jobs that any of us did. She never did marketing. She never did IT. She was never in any aspect of the job world. She was strictly a stay-at-home mom turned influencer on Instagram. And they hired her for the company meeting. And I had to travel to this. And after that, I felt degraded. I felt like this is not happening. This isn't a real company. This is a joke. For that matter, why would we have to travel for this? Why couldn't we have had a Zoom conference with her? Or watched a video about it on our computers? It was the most ridiculous meeting I've ever spent 3 days at in my entire life. The people in charge of you, it could be the low-level manager or it could be a high-level manager or any manager in between. Anyone in charge of you has no prior education or experience in the positions they hold. Now, this one really gets me, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you a personal experience with that. When I first went into corporate America, they had to FBI background check me. They literally FBI background checked me. I didn't need top security clearance to work this desk job, doing paperwork and checking data and putting together reports. There was nothing involved that I would have had to have, national security for. But the FBI background checked me. They also did a psychological profile to find out what my personality type was. But none of the managers had to go through any of that. But I did. And yet they put people in charge who have absolutely no education or experience in my field. But yet they had no background check and they had no personality profile done. But the workers did. The IT department works remotely and are either employed by the company or outsourced. But there is no direct line or communication is done through email only. There's no emergency number and there's no standby assistance. And it's a minimum of 3 to 4 days before anybody replies to you. And the first reply you get 3 to 4 days later is a generic canned email that says they received your inquiry and now you're in their query. In other words, you try to log in and your login isn't working. You don't know why. It's part of the network and it's on their end. You can't do your job for 3 whole days. So in the meantime, your manager's yelling at you. Why aren't you getting your work done? Where are the reports? I need these by 5 o'clock. I need these for a client meeting. And you're not able to do anything because you have no computer. But then IT doesn't care because there's a 3 to 4 day lag time. By the time you get back up and running, all those reports you should have done that contribute to whether or not you make commission and bonus, somebody else did on your behalf. The company's meeting costs more than the entire operating expenses of the company for a year. And the guest speakers are picked solely on the number of followers they have on social media. They have no experience, no background, no training, no expertise, no education in the topics discussed at the meeting. Like I've been saying, there might be an Instagram influencer. I have no problem with influencers personally. But if I go to a company meeting states away and have to spend 3 or 4 days there learning about something that will help me in my job duties, and somebody comes in that they just paid $25,000 because they're an influencer with 1 million subscribers or followers, you see, and that person knows nothing about our company, nothing what we do, and they come in and we're like, okay, well, can you help us with this? What do you think of this? Or we're trying to put this data together. Do you have any tips? And they come out with, well, it's not who you know. And we're all like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Can you clarify that? What do you mean by it's not who you know? That was the message. And we're sitting there like, well, you don't have any knowledge. You don't have any background. You don't have any industry expertise. Why are you here? And then guess what? The one that was fired from the competitor, yeah, that one, they chime in and say, it's not her job to tell you how to do yours. That's your job to figure out. And we were all sitting there like, what just happened? We drove up here for this, or we flew up here for this, or we took a train for this. One guy missed the bus and had to come the next day. I mean, the last thing to look out for. Now, before I go on to the last point I want to make, I just want to interject my professional experience in this topic about companies that hire social media influencers. When I was at the law firm, professional meetings include seminars to increase your knowledge, to teach you a class on something, and to expand on something that you do every day at your job. A social media influencer, if they know nothing about your job, cannot do that. So that is a huge red flag. And if you're in an interview and the person interviewing you tells you, oh yeah, we hire Instagram influencers for our meetings, then I would run with my life. I would say, oh no, thank you. And just leave the interview at that point, because take it from me, it will do nothing for you. It won't help you get ahead in the business. You are literally going to be a sitting duck, just waiting to be shown the door. My last point. The HR manager submits their resignation. Run. If you go to an interview and you find out the HR manager just submitted their resignation, or you're working at the company for a little while and the HR manager submits their resignation, honestly, I don't know any HR managers that submit their resignation lightly. HR managers that I have worked with at professional companies and professional careers have been the HR manager forever and ever. If an HR manager is leaving, that is a huge red flag. Other than a death, a birth, they're moving across the country, something like that. But when an HR manager comes up and says, yeah, I'm quitting, and they're like, 35, they're not retirement age, and you ask why, there's no explanation, no reason. They don't even have another job lined up. That is a huge red flag. That means that there is not just a shift coming in the company, but a tsunami. That is not a stable company. I hope you never see these red flags when interviewing or starting a new job. I hope if you're loyal to a company that they're loyal to you. I hope you find peace and happiness in whatever job you work for. But at the end of the day, I speak from experience. And these are just so that you may advocate for yourself before taking a job, which may end up doing more harm to your life than good. Thank you so much for watching today. Take care.